September 1944, almost midnight. It was 11:43 p.m., to be exact, outside Kielder, in the Northumbria forestry camp. The moon was just a tiny slice in the sky, barely giving off any light. Franz Bauer pressed himself against the damp ground, listening intently. Behind him, 3 other guys waited. There was Muller, the mechanic from Dresden, then Klein, a young farmhand from Bavaria, and Vogel, the quiet one who never spoke about what he had been through on the Eastern Front in Russia. The fence wasn't anything fancy, just old logging wire, not military-grade stuff. They'd been watching it for weeks, figuring out the best way to get through. Bauer felt the wire give a little. Then another strand snapped. Klein whispered a question. "The guard asleep?" Bauer breathed out. "We're close enough." They slipped through the gap, their boots sinking into the soggy ground. No barking dogs, no searchlights sweeping around. Just the huge, empty darkness of Northumbria and the wind whistling through the pine trees in the distance. Muller grinned. "We're free." But they weren't. What they didn't know was that in Northumbria, the land itself seemed to be watching. And the guys who knew the land best weren't soldiers. They were shepherds, gamekeepers, the guys who ran fell races. Men who could track foxes in thick fog, found lost sheep even in blizzards. The men who rode horses like their grandfathers did. The locals just called them cowboys, even though they'd never been anywhere near Texas. By dawn, those 4 Germans would learn that getting past a fence was the easy part. Escaping the border country? That was a different story altogether. They'd been told the British were done for some time. A dying empire, clinging to the past. British cities burning, its navy sinking, their resolve collapsing. Its countryside emptied by war. Its people too soft to fight. That's what the briefing said before they were shipped east. That's what the propaganda film showed. So, when Bauer wound up at Camp 18 near Kielder Forest 6 months earlier, he was expecting the worst. Brutality, starvation rations, guards who'd beat you for any little thing. Instead, a Scottish corporal handed him a blanket and said, "You'll be needing that. Gets cold up here." The barracks had stoves. The food wasn't great, but there was enough of it. The guards were strict, but not really cruel. They stuck to rules that Bauer didn't quite understand. Geneva Convention protocols, Red Cross inspections, work quotas that seemed almost fair. It was all strange. Not the punishment he'd expected, but something weirder. Order. Predictability, a kind of distant politeness that felt more like indifference. Bauer hated it worse than if they'd been cruel. At least cruelty would have made sense. This made him question everything. The idea popped into his head while they were doing forestry work. Bauer's crew was spending long days chopping down trees for the war effort, watched over by 2 guards who mostly sat by a fire, drinking tea and smoking. One afternoon, Muller pointed to a hole in the fence. It was half hidden by overgrown brush. "That's been loose for weeks," he whispered. Bauer glanced at the guards. They weren't paying attention. They hardly ever did. Not really. "They're lazy," Klein said. "We're confident," Bauer replied. That night, Bauer gathered the others in the corner of the barracks. He sketched a rough map on a scrap of paper. The fence line, the forest, the hills beyond. "We go north," he said. "Through Kielder Forest, over the border into Scotland. Then find a boat to Ireland or Norway." "How far?" Vogel asked. 50 miles, maybe 60. Klein frowned. "On foot, through the mountains?" "We're soldiers," Bauer said. "We've marched further." What he didn't mention was that he didn't really have a plan beyond getting through the fence. No maps, no compass, no clue about the terrain. Just stubbornness and despair. Muller, ever the optimist, grinned. "When do we go?" 3 nights from now. New moon. They shook hands in the dark, not knowing they were shaking hands on their own capture. The night was colder than they thought it would be. Frost covered the grass, and their breath turned to white clouds in the air. Bauer led them to the gap in the fence. They'd been working on it for the past 3 days, loosening one wire at a time during their bathroom breaks when no one was watching. Now, it peeled back like a fresh wound. One by one, they crawled through. Muller caught his jacket on a barb, tearing it as he yanked himself free, cursing under his breath. Klein slipped in the mud and almost fell. But in less than 2 minutes, all 4 of them were outside the wire, their hearts pounding. The forest loomed ahead, dark and seemed never-ending. "Stay close," Bauer whispered. "No lights, no talking." They moved into the trees. The ground was uneven, with roots and rocks hidden under layers of pine needles. Within 20 minutes, Bauer was already disoriented. Everything looked the same. Dark trees, matching dark sky, matching dark ground. Clean stumbled. Which way is north? Bauer pointed with confidence, even though he wasn't sure. They walked for hours, the cold seeping into their worn uniforms. By dawn, they'd covered maybe 8 miles, but none of them knew which direction they were heading in. As the sky started to get lighter, they found a rocky overhang and huddled beneath it, exhausted. "We rest here," Bauer said. "Move again tonight." Muller pulled out a piece of bread he'd saved from yesterday's ration. They split it into 4 tiny pieces, chewing in silence. Clean looked out at the hills that never seemed to end. "Where are we?" "Free," Bauer said. But Vogel, staring at the horizon, said quietly, "We're lost." Back at the camp, the morning roll call revealed the missing prisoners. For missing, the sergeant reported to the camp commandant, Major William Hartley. Hartley was a slim man in his 50s, a First War veteran who'd been brought out of retirement to run Camp 18. He listened calmly, sipping his tea. "How long?" "Sometime after midnight." Hartley nodded. "Alert the local police and call Ridley." "Ridley, sir?" "Jack Ridley, the head gamekeeper. If anyone can find them, it's him." Within an hour, word had spread through the valley. For Germans were loose. At his stone cottage 3 miles away, Jack Ridley pulled on his boots and checked his rifle. His son Tom, a wiry 23-year-old who had a shepherd's instinct, was already saddling the horses. "How many?" Tom asked. "4. Armed." "Doubt it, but they sure are desperate." Jack whistled, and 2 border collies came running. He got on his horse, a sturdy fell pony named Bracken, and looked toward the forest. "They'll head north, thinking they can reach Scotland." Tom grinned. "They don't know about the bogs." "No," Jack said. "They don't." By mid-morning, 6 men were riding into the hills. Jack and Tom Ridley, 2 other gamekeepers, and 2 shepherds who knew every sheep track and deer path for 50 square miles. They weren't soldiers. They were country guys. And in this country, that made them even more dangerous. Fog rolled in thick by midday, swallowing the hills in gray silence. Bauer and his men moved carefully, trying to keep heading north. This country was sneaky. Valleys twisted back on themselves. Streams ended up nowhere. What looked like solid ground turned out to be muddy bogs that sucked at their boots. By afternoon, they were soaked, cold, and arguing. "We should have gone east," Clean said. "East is back toward the camp," Muller snapped. "We're walking in circles." "Quiet," Bauer hissed. "Both of you." Vogel, who was crouched by a stream, held up a hand. "Listen." They froze. Faint in the distance. The sound of hooves. "Soldiers," Clean whispered. "No," Vogel said slowly. "Horses." They moved fast, scrambling up the heather-covered slope and flattening themselves behind a stone wall. Through the mist, shapes appeared. 6 riders moving in a wide line, careful and slow. The lead rider stopped. He got off, crouched down low, and looked at the ground. "Jack," one of the others called. "They came through here," Jack Ridley said. "Maybe 2 hours ago, heading northwest toward Deadwater Bog." Jack nodded grimly. "If they keep going, they'll be in waist-deep by nightfall." The riders moved on, disappearing into the fog like ghosts. Bauer let out a breath slowly. "They're tracking us." "How?" Muller said. "We didn't leave a trail." Vogel looked at the muddy ground beneath them, the broken heather, the trampled moss. "We left everything." By late afternoon, the ground started to sink. What had been solid ground became treacherous marshland. Bauer tested each step, feeling the earth shift. "Careful," he warned. Clean stepped forward confidently and then sank into his knees. He yelled and started flailing. Muller grabbed his arm and hauled him back. "Thanks," Clean gasped, staring at the black water where he'd stepped. Bauer looked around. Everywhere he looked, reeds, standing water, patches of moss that might be solid or might swallow a manhole. "We can't cross this," Vogel said. "We have to," Bauer replied. "It's the only way north. It's suicide. So is going back." They argued for 10 minutes before trying to skirt the bog's eastern edge. It took them an hour to cover half a mile, checking every step, their backs aching. And then Vogel stopped. "Look." On a low hill ahead, silhouetted against the gray sky, 6 riders were watching. Not charging, not shouting, just watching. Jack Ridley sat relaxed in his saddle, his rifle across his lap. Next to him, Tom grinned. "They're hurting us," Bauer said quietly. "What?" "Like sheep. They're not chasing us. They're guiding us." Clean's voice cracked. "To where?" Bauer looked around. Behind them, the swamp. To the left and right, open ground with nowhere to hide. Ahead, the riders. To nowhere, Bauer said. They're just waiting for us to give up. Night fell fast. The temperature dropped. The 4 Germans huddled in a shallow ditch, shivering, hungry, their hope fading. Klein wept quietly. Muller stared into the distance. Vogel, always silent, closed his eyes. Bauer tried to stay awake, but he was exhausted. They'd been moving for 20 hours with no food and really awful bog water to drink. Then, out of the darkness, a voice called out, calm, almost friendly. You lads all right down there? Bauer looked up. On the ridge above, a man was standing, holding a lantern. Jack Ridley. We know you're cold, Jack went on. And hungry, too, I'd bet. No shame in that. Bauer didn't say anything. Here's the thing, Jack said. You can stay out here and freeze, or you can come with us. Get warm, get some food. No one's going to hurt you. We're prisoners, Bauer called back. Yep, Jack said. And you'll still be prisoners tomorrow. But tonight you can be warm prisoners or dead ones. Your choice. Muller looked at Bauer. France. Bauer closed his eyes. Every part of him wanted to keep running, but his body knew what was true. They were done. We surrender. Jack nodded. Smart lad. Come on up slowly. The 4 men climbed the slope, their legs shaking. Tom Ridley handed each of them a hot tea from a thermos. Bauer took it, his hands trembling. The first sip burned his throat, but it was the most amazing pain he'd ever felt. Klein drank and started crying again. Thank you, he whispered in German. Jack didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It's all right, he said gently. You're all right now. They were loaded onto 2 spare horses, their hands loosely tied, more for show than because they needed it. The ride back was slow, the horses carefully picking their way through the dark. Tom rode beside Bauer. You almost made it to Deadwater Bog, he said. Bauer said nothing. Would have been bad, Tom continued. That bog's taken sheep, taken deer, almost took my cousin once. Why are you telling me this? Bauer asked. Tom shrugged. So you know, the fence wasn't what stopped you. It was the land. They rode in silence for a while. Then Bauer asked, are you cowboys? Cowboys. Tom laughed. Where'd you hear that? The guards. They say you ride horses and catch men. Well, Tom said, grinning. We ride horses and we know the country. But cowboys. He shook his head. We're just shepherds. This is what we do. Find things that are lost. Bauer thought for a moment. And return them. Usually, Tom said. Sometimes to their flock, sometimes to their camp. When they reached the village, locals came out to watch. No anger, just curiosity. An old woman handed Jack a basket bread. For the Germans, she said. They look half-starved. Jack passed the bread around. Bauer bit into it slowly. The taste was almost overwhelming. Klein whispered, why are they nice to us? I don't know, Bauer said. But I'm afraid to find out. Major Hartley was waiting at the camp gate. He thanked Jack Ridley, shook his hand, and paid him a small fee. Then, he turned to the 4 escapees. Bauer expected punishment, solitary confinement, reduced rations, maybe even a beating. Instead, Hartley sat down behind his desk and poured himself tea. Sit, he said. They sat, confused. Hartley looked at them. You made it 8 miles. Not bad. But you were never going to make it 50. We could have, Bauer begun to say. No, Hartley said flatly. Because you don't know this land. You were never going to make it because the men who do know it weren't going to let you die in it. He pushed a map across the desk. Take a look. Bauer studied it. The forest, the bogs, the hills, a big, tangled mess. You think we're your enemy, Hartley said quietly. And in the war, we are. But out here, the land is the biggest enemy. And those men that brought you back? He smiled faintly. They've been fighting that enemy their whole lives. He stood up. You'll spend 3 days in the disciplinary barracks. Reduced rations, then back to work. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. Dismissed. As they left, Hartley called after them. Bauer. Bauer turned. Don't try it again. You're safer here. 3 days alone gave Bauer a lot of time and space to think. He was replaying the escape, the small bit of planning, the execution, the pride. They'd treated it like a military thing. But the men who'd caught them hadn't treated it like war. They'd treated it like work, like finding a lost sheep. On the 3rd day, Jack Ridley came to visit. He sat across from Bauer in the small cell, holding his hat in his hands. Just wanted to see how you're doing, Jack said. Bauer looked at him wearily. Why? Curiosity, mostly. You're the first German I've ever met, and, well, and you're not what I was expecting. Bauer almost smiled. Neither are you. They sat there for a moment. Then Bauer asked, why did you help us? We're the enemy. Jack thought about it. Out there, he said, gesturing toward the window. A man lost in the bogs doesn't have a nationality. He's just someone lost. And we don't let men die if we can help it. It's not about the war. It's just being human. In Germany, Bauer said slowly, we were told that the British have no humanity left. Well, Jack said, I imagine you were told that we're all monsters. He stood up, placing his hat back on his head. Now I know propaganda's a liar. On both sides. He left. Bauer sat, staring at the wall, feeling something crack open inside himself. Not his loyalty, but his certainty. When Bauer returned to the main camp, the other prisoners stared. Some with contempt, others with a strange admiration. Muller clapped him on the back. France. They didn't shoot you. No, Bauer said. They fed me. Work started back up again. Forestry, road repair, all the same boring things. The work became the same dull and steady rhythm of camp life. Something shifted inside Bauer. The hatred he once felt for the guards was gone, replaced by a look of confusion. One afternoon, a British corporal named Davies shared his cigarettes with Bauer during a break. Heard you try to make a run for it, Davies said, matter-of-factly. Yes, Bauer admitted. Ridley brought you back, right? Bauer nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. Davies chuckled. He's something else, that one. Legend has it, he once found a downed RAF pilot in a snowstorm and carried him 5 miles on his back. Bauer frowned. He's not a soldier, though? Nah, Davies confirmed. Just a shepherd. But he knows this land better than any high-ranking officer. Bauer pondered Davies' words. He said we were lost. You were lost, Davies agreed. Kilda Forest isn't like Berlin. You can't just stroll through it. But Ridley, he could. It's because he belongs to it. That phrase stuck with Bauer, belongs to it. It wasn't about conquering or dominating the land, but about being a part of it. When Christmas arrived, the camp underwent another transformation. This time, Jack Ridley and some other locals were invited to the camp celebration. They showed up on horseback, bearing gifts like sacks of tobacco, little handmade carvings, and hand-knitted socks. Bauer watched, fascinated, as Tom Ridley shook hands with German prisoners, laughing at jokes that were translated haltingly through broken English and even worse German. During dinner, Jack sat down next to Bauer. How's the leg? He asked, nodding toward the knee Bauer had twisted during his failed escape. Feeling better? Yes, thank you. Good. Jack carved a piece of turkey and gave it to Bauer. Eat up. You're still too skinny. Bauer ate slowly, thoughtfully. Why do you come here? We are your enemy. Jack put his fork down. You were never my enemy, lad. You're just a soldier caught in a war. The same could have happened to my son. Your son? Tom is here, the one who rides by side on the way back laughed and joked with me. Bauer turned to look across the room. Tom was showing a German private how to throw darts, both of them laughing. He doesn't hate me, Bauer said, almost to himself. No, Jack responded quietly. He doesn't. None of us do. Later, as someone played an accordion and the men sang carols, Bauer found tears streaming down his face. Not from sadness, but from being overwhelmed by undeserved kindness. Clean, the man next to him, asked quietly. France, are you okay? No, Bauer replied honestly. I don't think I am. In January 1945, Bauer wrote a letter to his younger brother, who was still fighting on the Eastern Front. The camp censor read it, as they did with all letters, but allowed it to pass. I have escaped, not from the camp, but from the lies. Asterisk, the British aren't what we've been told. They don't torture. They don't starve people. They follow rules that I don't fully understand, but which seem based on something older than this war. I tried to escape in September and was caught by shepherds on horses, not soldiers. They could have left us to die in the bogs, but instead, they gave us tea. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know what this means for the Reich or for Germany. But I know now that strength isn't what I thought it was. Strength is the man who carries his enemy to safety because it's the right thing to do. Asterisk. Asterisk, stay alive, Hans. When this is over, we'll need men who remember what decency looks like. Asterisk. Your brother, France. The letter reached his brother 3 weeks before Hans was killed in the Vistula offensive. Bauer wouldn't find out about this until 1946, but the letter survived. His sister-in-law kept it, and years later, it was donated to a local museum in Northumberland, displayed next to a photo of Jack Ridley on horseback. By the spring of 1945, the war was coming to an end. News trickled in, bit by bit. Berlin encircled, Hitler dead, surrender was near. In Camp 18, the German prisoners listened in stunned silence. Bauer sat outside, gazing at the forest where he'd once tried to disappear. It looked different now, not like a prison, not like an escape route, but just land, beautiful and indifferent. Jack Ridley paid one last visit before the prisoners were moved south for repatriation. "You'll be going home soon," Jack said. "There is no home to go to," Bauer said quietly. "Germany is rubble. Then you'll rebuild." Jack pointed toward the forest. "With what we use here, your hands, your back, and what you have learned." Bauer looked at him. "What did I discover?" Jack smiled. "That running doesn't gain you freedom. Knowing where your land does." They shook hands. Jack tipped his hat and rode away with his dogs trotting. Bauer watched until he disappeared into the trees. In 1947, Bauer returned to Germany. Hamburg was devastated. His family's home was gone, and his parents had passed away. However, he carried two items: a small, carved sheep, a present from Tom Ridley, and a folded chart to land. He worked construction, fixing homes, and later married a woman named Ingrid, who managed to survive Dresden. He has two children. In 1953, he wrote to Jack Ridley. The message took close to 4 months to reach him. "Dear Jack, I am alive. I am rebuilding. I am teaching my son that strength isn't ruling, but being held back. I think about the tea and you and your son, and I thank you for telling me what it means to belong. France." Jack wrote back. "France. Great to see you alive. Come visit soon. Jack." In 1965, Bauer returned to Northumberland. He met Jack, now in his 70s, and Tom, who ran the farm. They rode into the forest together, retracing the route he had taken. "I would have died there," he said. Jack replied. "But you didn't because of you." "No," Jack corrected, "because of the land. To teach you who you are, if they're ready or not." The escape failed, but something succeeded. For men ran thinking freedom was distance. They learned freedom was understanding. Those men who caught them were not just any soldier. Those men read the map on its own like muddy boot prints. They rode horses to work not for the war. In Germany, he discovers power was conquest. In Sumberland, he finds that knowledge is not fighting. In 2003, a small building opens in Kilda village. Within it sits a worn leather saddle that belonged to Jack Ridley, a map, and a small note. Tourists inquire and ask, "Cowboys and British?" "Not cowboys," she said while smiling. "It's only a small memory of Jack himself teaching the German soldier what it's like to be strong." The dusk had arrived, and the museum closed. The hills began to darken. All that was left was an elderly shepherd. The barbed wire might be gone, but the memory and the lesson it learned stayed, and it was that you can escape what you've been through, but not those who stand by you.